and good morning. Welcome to the finale day of the Summer Institute. I'm Cynthia Baker, chair of COA's board. We opened the Institute on Sunday with the arts, on the armchair of the Harlem Renaissance, with a screening of Once Upon a Time in Harlem and a conversation with the filmmakers following. And then on Monday, music. Rhiannon Giddens broke into opera and reframed for us the history of the banjo. Easter eggs followed throughout the week, references to art and culture, important to help us understand the complex society in which we live. Which brings us to this morning, a spotlight directly on our distinctly American culture, an essential ingredient to achieve a more perfect union. Two of the most prominent cultural critics writing today, Tony Scott and Gia Tolentino, will be in conversation. Then Nick Thompson will return to the stage to talk with human rights activist Ennis Freedom Cantor, who translated a prominent position in American sport, what's more cultural than that, in the NBA, into so much more. While arts and culture in America is amazing, such creative drive, freedom of expression, and a melting pot of cultural diversity that makes for such a rich palette of production and ideas, there's nothing fun about our culture wars. So, with our cultural critics this morning to help us make sense of all this, I've been thinking about threads across our discussions this week, the importance of critical thinking in the face of AI, misinformation, deepfakes, climate deniers, ballot deniers, even what our founding fathers fomented. And there's another thread, that education is the antidote to ignorance. Education is the propellant of critical thinking. We're sitting on a remarkable college campus. COA students and all the students across America are what gives us hope, right? So let's dig in this morning. It's my honor to introduce our speakers for this first session. American culture is a mess, and we love it. Gia Tolentino has said that she likes to do things that are hard in an interesting way. At the same time, she was talking about writing Trick Mirror, her book of essays. And in the same interview, she said that she likes to be really busy. She likes the pace of the internet. And that's a good thing for us, as we want to hear from her this morning on this fast-paced world we live in. Gia was listed as a Forbes 30 under 30 in 2017, based in part by trailblazing her way through the ever-changing world of online media as a writer for NewYorker.com, deputy editor for Jezebel, and contributing editor of the women's blog, The Hairpin. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Pitchforks, many other publications and online outlets. She's written screenplays, so much, is the mother of durable girls, and speaks widely. A.O. Scott, Tony now to you and me, lives in Maine, so we hope to see much more of him here at COA. He was a literary critic at Slate and the New York Times Book Review before he started writing about movies. About 2,200 articles and reviews of them over his 23-year tenure. Since 2023, he's been critic at large for the Times, writing literary criticism, book reviews, and poetry. He's become the nation's most prominent poetry critic, using the Times' interactive technology to analyze a single poem every month, which is not a whim of his later in this long career. He finished all the coursework and exams for a PhD in literature, and the planned dissertation was about mid-20th century American poetry. His career has then spanned countless movements in film, poetry, criticism, and literature. How lucky are we to have them join us on this stage this morning. Please give them a warm COA welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Tony.
Hi.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you to Sean and Lynn and COA for bringing us here. Thank you to Tony for putting up with my two mentioned children next to him at the Rhiannon Giddens concerts, which was
absolutely the most
incredible.
charming people I've seen in Bar Harbor by a lot. No offense to the present company.
The older one put an earplug in her belly button and said, "Tony, I have a carrot growing in me."
I was fooled too.
Yeah, I mean, me too for a second. So we are here to talk about American culture and what a mess it is, which means this is going to be kind of a appropriately disorderly and chaotic conversation. But nonetheless, a set of very obvious questions arises when we were talking about what could we possibly say in an hour about American culture, under this big tent. And one of them, probably the first one, is, well, is there any recent work of pop culture that comes to mind for either or both of us that takes on America as a whole subject, in all of its glory and all of its contradiction and all of its horror? And we both said
Sinners. And which turned out to be a great kind of coincidence or serendipity, since of course Rhiannon Giddens had so much to do with that movie, and so much. She was a musical consultant, and really her ideas about American culture and American music and the intermingling of traditions and the coexistence of great beauty and great terror and violence is sort of all over that film. How many have seen it? Okay.
So maybe a little recap.
A little recap. Yeah. The rest of you should. It's easy to stream, and so it was directed by and mostly written by Ryan Coogler, director of Fruitvale Station, Black Panther, Creed. Really one of the most interesting and most successful young or youngish directors to emerge in independent film and then kind of conquer Hollywood in the last decade or so. And it's in keeping with our sort of theme of mess and chaos, it's a sort of a genre mashup. It's a vampire movie. It's a horror movie. It's also a musical. It has elements of Western, I would say, and kind of gangster movie. It's a historical, it's sort of a period piece with some elements of scientific futurism as well. So there's a lot going on in it. And I think one of the things that we both were drawn to is that it's kind of, it's an example of what it's about. It's about how creativity, it's through a series of metaphors and kind of narrative choices, tries to tell the story of creativity in America, of American culture.
Right, it's a movie about cultural production. And I think something, if you haven't seen it, probably listening to all of those genres, you're like, how could that possibly work and be something that people like? And I think...
We might also spoil it, just to say.
Oh, God.
A little bit.
We have to. We can't not, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. It's still... I rewatched it last week, because, in preparation for this conversation, and it was better on second viewing.
Yeah,
Nothing is spoiled. But however, I am about to spoil the main trick of the movie, which is, the setup is these two identical twin brothers, both played by Michael B. Jordan. It's a classic kind of Hollywood. We've got one night to do it all. We've got one night to set up a juke joint, to throw the greatest party in the world that's gonna make us solvent, that's gonna get us out of this trouble we got into with these gangsters in Chicago, et cetera. So they're rounding up, it's kind of like the heist movie pleasure of they're grabbing the gang. They're getting, they grab these two Chinese grocers from the town. They grab blues musicians out of the field. They steal the preacher's son to play the banjo and sing.
It's in the Mississippi Delta in the mid-1930s, just to...
Yeah. And so in the first half of the movie, it's just this kind of minutely realized work of historical fiction. There's no sense of the supernatural. It's just these guys getting it together, re-encountering old loves, putting together the party. And then the party starts, and then come the vampires. These Irish musicians. How do we explain this?
Well, so the vampires. So it's there's all kinds of music sort of pulsing through the movie. There's gospel, there's church music, there's secular music, there's the blues. of various different kinds. And there's an important character who much later in life is played by the great Chicago blues musician Buddy Guy, and that's sort of a key plot and conceptual point. But so this group of musicians of white music. I mean, everybody that we've been seeing in the movie is black, is on that side of the Jim Crow color line, and these white musicians kind of show up. And they want to come and join the party. And the thing is about vampires, at least in vampire movies, is they won't cross the threshold unless you invite them in. And they show up and they're playing a song. They're like, well, we want to come and play music too and have a good time.
We love
too.
togetherness. Like,
Right.
Can't we all be as one?
Can't we all just sing together and
The
share
great American
our music?
promise.
Yes. And they play, the song that they play, their sort of little audition piece on the threshold, is Pick Poor Robin Clean, which was at the time that the movie is set, had already been recorded by several black artists. So it's a kind of already a crossover song in the sort of in the Rhiannon Giddens universe of sort of musical cross-pollination and sort of borrowing and theft and inspiration. So yeah, they're offering this sort of, we can all just be friends and play music together.
And then they're kind of they make their way in, and obviously, I mean, this is the metaphorical, the mythological thing that hovers over. But again, the movie itself, it's just a rollicking. It turns into like a horror movie. The vampires come in, the gorgeous kind of otherworldly blues performance that has been going on at the party the whole time becomes bloodshed. Like it literalizes the bloodshed kind of in cultural appropriation, like as a word, it's sort of like patriarchy, capitalism, like overuse has dulled the word itself, but this movie brings to life actually what it means, which is great violence. And so the black musicians are slaughtered, or they are turned into vampires. They are assimilated to this togetherness, and they begin to sing the song of the folk musicians,
Right.
of the vampires.
Right. Who also have their own kind of. There's one scene where you see them before they've been allowed in, and they're sort of singing Irish folk music about the sort of the horror and violence, of the old world. So there's this interesting thread, and the metaphor of the vampires is such a rich metaphor, because it on the one hand is, as you say, a metaphor of cultural appropriation, but also it's kind of an allegory of the industry, of the culture industry, because one of the things that happens, if you become a vampire, you never die. And you sort of keep going in this system that takes your creativity and exploits it, but gives you some sort of purchase on something else. So in a way, it's also playing with the whole idea of selling out and what that would be, what it would mean to kind of to take something that belongs to you and your place and time and culture and enter it into this sort of bigger system.
And so this might, it sounds didactic as we're talking about it, but let's talk about why it's so successful, why it's successful as a work of art, why it's successful as a work of popular, very, very popular art that actually, as Rhiannon Giddens was saying on stage, like she was saying, she has found a way to sneak these traditional things into very broad mainstream. Sinners it smuggles, and you don't need to know, you don't even need to care about it to enjoy the movie and to find the movie good as a work of pure entertainment. But so, what do you think? Why does this actually work? Because I think both of us are probably reflexively averse to anything that smacks of like, here's your lesson, right?
Right. Yeah. No, and it doesn't feel or play that way at all. You're entirely in the characters, and it's such like as I think Ryan Coogler's movies have been such a beautiful piece of filmmaking. I mean, the costumes by Ruth Carter are incredible. The music is great.
The cinematography won an Oscar.
Yeah,
I think it's because to me, it's like the music, the art itself, the music itself is so good. It's so convincing.
Yeah.
The musicians are so like both the Irish ones and the black blues musicians.
No, it's all really, so it's just very satisfying on that level, and I think that is very important. Like when we talk about, sometimes I think as critics, about cultural and cultural production, we sort of are extracting kind of lessons and themes and difficulties and thinking about sort of the meanings or the meta meanings and not always kind of keying into just the sort of the pleasures that are always part of it. I mean, so if you saw Rhiannon Giddens the other night, she was talking about some very difficult and hard and distressing truths about American history and American life that has sort of is the background for all of the music she was playing. But the music she was playing was so ecstatic, so beautiful, so complex and visceral at the same time. And I think there's some of that in the movie. It's just like if you want to go to the movies and just have a really good time at the movies, it will give you that.
And that, the musician that Tony was talking about, Buddy Guy, so what basically happens is the preacher's son, this virtuoso musician, he escapes, he's saved from the bloodbath. And he you know, we see in kind of a flash forward at the end, he's had this long life, he kind of becomes this iconic, legendary musician. And I was so moved rewatching it.
Yeah.
Like, I think one of the reasons it succeeds is the movie, it tells you, it allows you maybe the fantasy or maybe the honest belief that culture itself will, like beauty and art itself is enough to carry all of this, is enough to carry these narratives, these historical truths, these painful truths. It's the very, very end of the movie is Buddy Guy singing, playing the old banjo or whatever it is, and then it flashes back to, you know, them in the car through this sort of like hypnotic sharecropper cotton fields, and it's just, and you know, the movie, it's almost like the movie is voting to tell you,
Yeah.
the music will carry it, you know, the music, that art itself is capacious enough to hold it purely without explanation. You can feel all the pain within the tradition, and it's just there.
And in a way, it's kind of indestructible too. I mean, the movie doesn't have, I think, very many illusions about the beneficence of the movie business or American society for that matter. But the thing, the sort of the plot detail that emerges is you see this older man playing, you know, in this Chicago club, and he's visited by Haley Steinfeld and Michael B. Jordan, who's the surviving twin, and they're still young. It's you know, it's now, it's in the present, or it's you know, 60, 70 years later, but they're vampires, so they don't age. So they're sort of like, you know, coming in from the hip hop world and to this blues club, and what you learn is that the deal that they made with the vampires in a way was to protect him, was to protect this young musician, so that he would be spread, like the vampires wouldn't get him, which means that he would age and he would be mortal, but also that his art, that his music would survive. And I think that's a very, that was to me a very moving message, because there are these huge industries that produce and distribute and commercialize and commodify all of this culture, all of this creativity, all of this imagination, but they can't quite kill it.
Yeah, and there's, you know, I was thinking about the movie kind of replicates in miniature, or not in miniature, the movie sets up this framework where there's kind of a sacred space of this black juke joint that is then invaded and destroyed. And so it kind of prefigures and configures this kind of fundamentally American story that's happened over and over, right? Something that belonged to someone and then was taken by force, right? And yet the movie continues. It kind of lands in the space that we're having this conversation in, which is this has happened over and over and over again. But art is persisting, and we are here, you know, we're just here trying to make sense of it and to enjoy it and to find a way to process all of that through the art. And I think there's even something like the movie is set up where there's these two twins, Smoke and Stack, and they're kind of configured as the good and the bad twin. And there's in the movie signaling in that too, right? That there's, you know, these narratives of kind of violence and promise, like they're the good and the bad twins of each other. Like all the American mythological narratives are twinned in this way, and there's great glory and great destruction, and they're always they're always twins of each other fundamentally.
Right. You can't take them apart. And there was something I was struck by that Rhiannon Giddens said during our concert, was that genre doesn't really exist. She says it's sort of this thing that the industry puts on different kinds of music. And I think that in a way, one of the things that is sort of hopeful or inspiring or energetic, kind of about this movie, because it's just so, I mean, it's long, it's 2.5 hours long, but it just goes, and it just kind of picks you up and carries you wherever, you don't know where it's going, and it just takes you there, and it has a kind of energy. One of the things that I think makes it so quintessentially American is the defiance of category. It's like, it's a huge Hollywood movie made by Warner Brothers, and by a very, very commercially successful director. And yet it is also a very critical, subversive, challenging movie. And it's also saying, the thing is, what it is also what it says. It's also saying that you try to sort of draw these lines and demarcations. What's black music? What's white music? What's folk music? What's popular music? What's an indie film? What's a Hollywood
vampire
film?
who's not a vampire?
Who's a vampire? Who's not a vampire? And it's just, it's I think one of the great glories of so much American culture is to just mess with that.
So we were talking we should talk about what makes this, there are, it's hard right now to address a wide audience, right? And we were talking about what it means to take on America itself as a subject. And this movie, for one, it has the courage to do that. It has the courage to, and we were like, what makes this a successful taking on of America as a subject versus, let's say, what differentiates it from the superhero version?
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, which Coogler is also, conversant in. I mean, it's interesting to me, just to stay on him for one more second, that he sort of went through, he revived the Rocky franchise, which was such an interesting thing to do, and turned it also with Michael B. Jordan into the Creed franchise, which turned in some ways the racial politics of the original Rocky movie, which was kind of a backlash movie of the 70s, into something else. Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly what you were just talking about, that it is so much fun, that it doesn't, it kind of proceeds from that. It's sort of like, well, what do you want in America? Even if you're talking about in Mississippi, in 1936, in the depths of the Depression and Jim Crow, and the sort of, for the people living there, a very hard, very bad time. You want to have a good time. You want to have a party, and that is there is sort of, in a way, nothing more American than that idea. Like, we're gonna, what are we gonna do? We're gonna find a room. We're gonna find some musicians. We're gonna get some beer, and we're gonna have some fun.
And yeah, it's like we're gonna make something from nothing in this.
And it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to turn out to be art, but it's going to be the sort of the predicate is going to be fun.
And I think something that we were talking about too is, I don't think you kind of can't. I mean, it kind of instinctively, it feels to me that you can't take on America as a subject without taking on the bad twin, right? Like, you can't. It has the courage to. I mean, I think that is why it's so successful. It has the verve and the pleasure and the fun, but it is equally. It is so even-handedly unafraid, and that's something that Coogler's work has all the way through it. I mean, his Fruitvale Station was about a police killing in the BART train station in San Francisco. He's so even-handedly unafraid of taking on, and I kind of think you can't. Okay, what are other movies that we were saying have taken on this messy subject of America in itself successfully?
Yeah, no, because we did say, last phone conversation we had, we thought, well, we could just talk about Sinners for the whole hour, but then we decided we probably wouldn't do that, because some of you haven't seen it, and there are others. So let me turn the question around to you. Are there other, and not only movies, maybe? I mean, is there? Can you think of recent work in America that sort of that obviously not in exactly the same way that Sinners does, but that has a sort of similar ambition, and I like your word courage a lot, to sort of to find both, the pleasure and the pain to be exciting and even entertaining, but not necessarily escaping or denying the hard history.
I think that I was thinking of other there's not much that I could think of that matches the scale that that Sinners works on, and the all of the things that it ropes in. But I think of because so many both of our places of employment, every media outlet has been doing like, what's the most American X? What is the definitive American X for the sesquicentennial or whatever? Like I mean, staying in the movies were really the ones that I could think of recently. Like I think of to me, what comes to mind are other movies that have taken on specific, maybe smaller American myths, the making it out of nowhere, the reinvention, the escaping your past and becoming someone else. I think of movies like Moonlight and Anora, American Honey, so kind of coming of age, and something that they all have in common is a backdrop of great violence and an emotional presence of great hope. And of a desire for pleasure and of a desire for freedom, and to me, I was just even kind of retrofitting it back. I was like, that is kind of what the American story feels like to me. It is the backdrop of pain, and then the personal narrative of forward towards pleasure at any cost. Kind of. What is it? What were the other ones that came to mind for you?
Let's see. I was thinking. I mean, I spend a lot of time because I don't see as many movies as I used to, having sort of overdosed them on them. So I mean, I think a lot about music, and I listen to a lot about music. So I was thinking about Kendrick Lamar's DNA.
You think DNA is the one that did it?
Or maybe it's Pimp a Butterfly. Maybe
Yeah,
it's Pimp a Butterfly is the one. That's probably the one I listen to more. But also, I think even I don't know why, just because I was listening to it, trying to learn it of all things, but Shabuzi's Tipsy, bar song.
Yeah, another work of synthesis.
Another work of synthesis, and let's say not a work that has necessarily, on its surface at least, profound things to say about the state of American culture and America at large, and yet is sort of in a similar space to Sinners in that everybody's in the bar getting tipsy, and it's a black artist in a what's been defined sort of or mischaracterized, I think, or ideologically limited as a white form, which is country and Western music, and I think that's interesting. I mean, I think the whole phenomenon of black country music of the last decade or so is a really fascinating development in just to sort of to keep in the Rhiannon Giddens narrative of sort of it's all mixed up.
Or even, I mean, one of my favorite kind of country albums of recent was by the pop artist CMAT, who is Irish, and one of those songs is in Gaelic, and yet it's country. The album's called Euro Country. It's interesting. Tipsy too is an amazing act of, because that was originally a club song by Jaquan, a black rapper, in 2006, and then it was reappropriated in several different directions, and it became this huge mainstream country hit. It's interesting that you bring up Kendrick Lamar, who also, I remember when I heard his debut album in 2012 or whenever it was, I instantly, he has the kind of Kugler-esque ability. I remember hearing it and feeling like I was reading Our Mutual Friend or something, or A Tale of Two Cities. There was something that announced itself it felt so, I mean, literally the first time I heard it, I was like, this should win. Not even not speaking as a joke at all, I was like, this should win the Pulitzer Prize. It was so dense. There was such a literary world that was built within it. And I wasn't even listening to the words. It was just, it appeared. What is it about DNA or To Pimp a Butterfly? Or his work in general that you would say?
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways it like a lot of hip hop, it's a narrative that is kind of what you were just alluding to, is sort of a sort of, in a way, a bootstrap narrative, a young person in hard circumstances, sort of by their own kind of grit and gumption and talent, sort of making themselves into something. But in a way, I think by the time he arrived in hip hop, that was sort of a cliche. That was just sort of every story being told again and again, and a very sort of and certain sort of tropes of authenticity that had become just sort of reused. And he had, I think, both a critical take on that, and there's something, in a way, I don't know enough about music to say what it was, but there's sort of a musical density and also a sort of sociological specificity.
Yeah.
Like he's talking about so you get the feeling of a place and of a world from which this voice is sort of emerging in its own kind of uniqueness and audacity. But that world is there in the sampling and also in the words, I think.
Yeah, it feels like you can more. It's like having not truly kind of avoided the New Yorkers, like what's the most American? I was like, I can't. This is too big of a subject. And then here we are having to talk about it. It is that the micro specificity. If you are brave enough to do that and do it really well, it blows it up. Like that's why I felt like Moonlight and Enora and which probably people here, everyone's seen those, and American Honey, which maybe fewer people have, which is a story of like a ragtag band of magazine salesmen moving from motel to motel, and I forget even what part of the country it's in.
It's sort of in the it's all over the place, but sort of I think the prairies in the West. They do end up in Texas at one point because they meet those guys with the swimming pool who are going to have
the tequila
steaks.
worm,
and that that movie, it has an image for me because the person who runs, it's sort of all these kind of runaway kids who are. It's supposed to be like the 80s or something, because no one's selling magazine subscriptions door to door these days. But they're sort of roped into this thing where they have this fake, like, oh, I'm trying to get myself through college, or I'm supporting this. It's a bit of a scam, and they're selling magazine subscriptions. But the one who's sort of the den mother, camp director, is played by Riley Keough, who's of course Elvis Presley's granddaughter. And there is a scene where she in the motel, and they knock on the door. She opens the door and she's wearing a bikini imprinted with the Confederate flag. Yeah. And it's just like that. If you want an American image, somehow it's like Elvis's granddaughter in a Confederate flag bikini is just. It's burned in my.
Riley Keough herself. I mean, there are dissertations to be written, and I'm sure have, on what she has done with her image, all of her roles. There was the NASCAR heist movie, which I forget what's that called.
Logan Lucky.
Logan Lucky. There's the incredible role she plays in Zola, the most successful black scent that a white woman has ever done on screen. It is so funny, so good, so deadpan, so courageous, and really funny.
Yes.
And it's interesting, like, I guess it, to kind of, to speak to the subtext of what we're talking about, it does feel more often that black artists, non-white artists, more often are positioned in such a way and make, much of the art we're talking about, the art that will speak very directly to these, the mythology and the truth and the fiction of it all, But I was like, okay, what are white works of culture that say what America is? Okay, and I was just thinking about it while you were talking, and I was like, honestly, okay, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Does it perfectly for me. I do think American Honey, fundamentally, even though the lead of it is a mixed race actress.
Right. And the director is British.
Yes.
But
what I'm going to put you on the spot. What are recent, I don't know, it could be music, books. What were we talking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm actually
Ken waiting.
Yes, no. I'm a big fan of country and southern rock and sort of I'm a huge fan of the Drive-By Truckers, who I think that the two songwriters, Mike Cooley and Patterson Hood, write some, and they have an amazing record which came out in 2016, and I'm blanking on the title of it. Maybe someone will, which is sort of telling is in a way similar, I think, to what you were saying about Sinners, is kind of confronting, gun violence, the history of racism and kind of white revanchism in America, and kind of not flinching from the sort of difficult, ugly, painful aspects of the story. But they're a great rock band, and it's a great, it's just a great, it has great tracks on it. And I think it's partly doing that same thing where it's entirely, it's not trying to teach the lesson, but in a way to make the music that they want to make, just as I think to make Sinners the way he wanted to make it. You can't skirt it. You can't evade it. So you have to go through it in some way and see how it works. And there are, I mean, I have a whole sort of pantheon of American artists. I mean, I was listening during this sort of, this 250th exercise, and what's the most American thing you can find? I stumbled down like a Merle Haggard rabbit hole, and Merle Haggard, such an interesting and complicated figure in his own right. I mean, in some ways, the forerunner of sort of MAGA cultural resentment, wrote a lot of very kind of what you have to say are sort of reactionary ballads in the 60s and 70s against, hippies and drug culture and TV and feminism and all of these things. But like, those songs are sung with such conviction and wit and awareness of their own kind of potential to be reversed ironically, that they have a lot, there's a lot of American kind of energy in there too.
I was pitching you on Jeremy Saulnier, who is a director who I love, who has kind of, like, one of his most recent movie was called Rebel Ridge, which is kind of a thriller, a Netflix thriller about civil forfeiture, and it's unbelievably good. It's on Netflix. I couldn't recommend it more. But he set another kind of thriller horror movie in a white supremacist colony in rural Idaho, I think. And this is like he takes his movies kind of sidelong way, in a very almost like TNT movie way, take on kind of whiteness as a subject and power, and really, like, I mean, literally making a thriller about civil forfeiture in a way that you would like, in something that you would love to watch on an airplane. Yeah. I was like, this is American art. This is incredible. And I feel like you rewatched something. I got you to.
Yes, Green Room, which is is that his first movie, or
I think it's like third, because Blue Ruin there was like a
right.
feud Southern Gothic movie, another
No, and Green Room, which I not only watched it, but I with some trepidation went and read my review of it.
It wasn't, you didn't pan it.
No, I didn't pan it.
Right.
Actually, it was okay, but I had sort of remembered. I felt like when I saw it, it's also sort of, has some Western aspects in that it's sort of a big kind of shootout. It's sort of a small, outnumbered group of people trying to fight their way out of a very bad situation. It's a punk band. They have this gig somewhere in the Pacific Northwest at what turns out to be like a Nazi hangout. And they sort of, as they realize this, they decide they're going to do a cover of the Dead Kennedys' Nazi Punks Fuck Off, to just sort of provoke their hosts, and it ends up going kind of badly, but to understate it. But it's and Aaliyah Shawkat is in it. I mean, it's a really, but in a way it's so just, the story is the story, and in some ways it felt, looking back on it, feels kind of prescient, because it was, what was it, like 2015 or 16? It was like, so it was kind of early in the cycle of like actual Nazis coming to prominence in American life and politics. So that felt kind of like, oh really, oh come on, that the political insights that it turned out to have were the thing that I sort of had missed. And I think in a way, because somebody who like Saulnier, who's kind of paying attention to these currents in the culture and in youth culture and popular culture that aren't always visible let's say to New York Times critics, sort of saw some things that were on the edge of happening more widely.
And again, it's a really small world. Like, it all happens in 300 square feet, and there's something about it. Like, when I was making a list for myself of like, what do I think is the most American X, and I was thinking about like what came to mind immediately. Okay, for books, I'll tell you. Okay,
Yeah,
for books, it was Gone with the Wind, which I recently reread. Unbelievable, so evil, so good, unbelievable book. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. For I was thinking visual art. I don't, I'm not. I was. What feels like the most American. I was just thinking like land art, like I used to live in Houston. There was a Turrell installation in a Quaker church, and I was like, this is the most beautifully American thing I've ever seen in my life. Like Spiral Jetty, something like that. Like something that speaks to, like, there's something about, like, there's always something in there about like scale and mythos. And
The Watts Towers, maybe.
yeah, and what else was I? Okay, I wrote it down. Oh yeah, and then nonfiction. Nonfiction, I think of. Like, has anyone read Random Family? Like that's one of my favorite books of all time, and it's just. Have you ever read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
beautiful. Yeah.
a journalist embedded with a family in the Bronx for 11 years and just follows them, and it's minute through like heartbreaks and babies and jail time and welfare bureaucracy and love and heartbreak, and it feels like Middlemarch to me. It has that kind of, the thing we were talking about in Kendrick's music, the thing that made me feel like, oh, I'm reading Charles Dickens's Our Mutual Friend. Like, I'm reading a sweeping work, and like it's something that combines like the diminishment and the
Yeah.
What are
So
your
what
most American books?
I actually was thinking of after our last conversation, when we talked, as we may not get time to today, but we talked a lot about westerns, about sort of the western as a kind of quintessential and also in every way problematic American genre. And I thought I had happened to watch the 4-hour Judd Apatow documentary about Mel Brooks, who just turned 100, and I had to say Blazing Saddles. I mean, Blazing Saddles, which I saw, which was a terribly inappropriate movie for me to see when it was in theaters that I saw it. I remember there was one summer I was at summer camp when I was like 10 or 11, and they showed it. At camp, and some of the counselors were so offended that they sort of organized a little, if people are going to be offended by this, we can, there's something else, you can go and have s'mores down by the lake or whatever. But because that one for me, I mean, I think Mel Brooks is in his own way a quintessential American artist, and that movie, which he wrote with Richard Pryor, that Richard Pryor was supposed to star in but wasn't able to, is just kind of the craziest. Talk about a mess. I mean, and it just goes every single place that you think you couldn't possibly make a joke out of this, and does, as he could, with even, he's the only one who could make a Hitler joke, I think, in all of American history. So that's one. Books I just recently read, and this is sort of a little bit. It's a book by the Mexican writer Alvaro Enrique, called Now I Surrender, and it's also a Western. It's his newest book. He has his previous book was called You Dreamed of Empires, and it's about the encounter between Cortez and Montezuma. It's a fantastic book. This one, Now I Surrender, is sort of a little. It's a little more sprawling, a little more discursive, but it's about the Apache Wars. It's about it's telling about sort of the what happened on the border between Mexico and America, about a territory that is very well represented in Western movies. I mean, so many Western movies take place in Arizona territory in the 1870s and 80s. Like, just about every classic Western of the 50s is sort of there. 3:10 to Yuma, The Searchers, any of it. And he tells the story from this he kind of changes the angle. So he's saying, well, this is a three-way thing. This is the sort of, there's the Apache Nation, there's the Mexican Republic, and there's the United States of America. And what you think from these movies was happening isn't quite what was happening. And he just goes very deep into some real historical characters, some invented characters, and just kind of wakes up the history in a way that I found very kind of exciting and challenging, and also a reminder that there's always going to be a new way to tell it. You know, that however we may think sometimes that our narratives and our myths and our genres are kind of exhausted or feeding on themselves, there's going to be more.
Yeah, I think the revisionist, the Western, I mean, I love the genre. It's impossible not to love. It feels, it's so full of its own particular pleasures. And I think, like, so we were talking about why does this feel like perhaps the most American genre? And I think because it can speak to the scale of this land that in a way that, you know, I mean, I guess many of the things that we're talking about are kind of very land specific, you know, a lot of this, but it's because it's inherently violent and it's inherently almost like, so it puts the substance of it right there and then makes the fun and the danger, you know, like grow out of it. And I think you were saying earlier, you're rereading In the Distance, the Hernan Diaz Western, which I think is very successful. It just makes it strange and grotesque and not, and there's even I haven't seen it, but the Netflix, they did a reboot of Little House on the Prairie.
I haven't seen that.
But that's apparently kind of trying to, you know, it's kind of trying to have both in a way that I haven't seen it, but it seems admirable to me that they are, you know, they're trying to present these books that we all love, that everyone grew up with, and yet, you know, they're hard to read as an adult and stomach the parts with the Native Americans in them, and so they redid the whole thing, and they're trying to, and they tilt the angles on every episode. Yeah. They show the cruelty at the same time they show the, you know, the honest familial dream of the pioneer family. What is it about the Western for you?
I mean, it's a few things, because there are, you know, there's before the movies, there's the literary Western going back to James Fenimore Cooper, and it is sort of such a primary myth, you know, the frontier and the sort of the Western movement. And it's so, I mean, I spent enough time, it's kind of in graduate school adjacent to American studies, to sort of absorb all of the versions of this as sort of like a key, not the only key maybe, but a key that unlocks some of the essence, or the sort of the fundamental realities and myths of America. And there's a great recent, actually, nonfiction book, is Greg Grandin's The End of the Myth, which is about the frontier and the border, and it's about how sort of America's idea of itself, in some admirable but also in some very terrible ways, was construed around the idea of the frontier and sort of where we can go, and then the border of, like, well, who we can keep out. And I think that the Western has all of this kind of poetry to it, including visual poetry. I mean, when you think about the inventions of movies, it's not an accident that some of the first movies were Westerns, because some of the first movies, they're like, you have motion pictures, and if you have horses and trains, you know, that's what moves better than that. So I think, you know, so many directors, even early in the history of movies, that was some of the first location shooting that was done once the movies moved to California, and you know, you could just go up into the San Fernando Valley, and it was the Wild West. It was pretty close to still being the West. So and I think too, not to ramble on too much about it, but there are so many different stories you can tell. You have this sort of concentrated idea that of sort of movement and wilderness and dispossession of the people there, and of building something new on it that repeats itself, you know, moving across the continent. But everything can happen within those stories. So there's some Westerns that are just very focused on, like, character and action and relationships between men and women, between men and horses, between men and the land. And then, you know, there are stories that can have sort of more grandeur, more sweep, and can become kind of allegories of how does a society organize itself, and how does a society founded in violence re-found itself on the basis of something else, of justice or law or fairness.
Yeah, what was Hostels? Is that what I?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was, I don't know. I had not,
Cooper.
I'd kind of passed me by, but it's interesting.
Nobody saw it.
What year did that come out? 2018 or something
I
like
think
that?
2018, yeah.
It's interesting, like, to see. It was good. It's hard to have it both. It's hard to have all that beauty and all that
Right.
poetry, and manage, and I think that movie manages better than most contemporary westerns, much better than the sort of Yellowstone type thing.
Yeah.
Which also, I mean, speaking of, I always forget. Like, I think of Hell or High Water as a very successful,
Yeah.
kind of like truly American movie, and then Yellowstone is not. But we don't have time to talk about that. But I think, you know, I like many millennials reread or read Lonesome Dove for the first time a few years ago, and you know, that is an example of a, you know, I had always, growing up in Texas, I'd always been like, this team seems too propagandistic for me. And then I read it and I was like, oh, it's not at all. It's deflating from within. It's so sad from page one.
Yeah.
And then because of that, it is rendered so much truer and more beautiful. And you know, the myths that they believe in that are falling apart in front of their eyes are much more, yeah, they work. They're conveyed more than if they had been just believed in unequivocally from the beginning. And there's something about the kind of delusive quality of a Western, right? There's always a dream that the movie starts with, that the narrative starts with, that is punctured either slowly or in a great wash of violence and a great shootout, and then you reconstitute yourself again and get on your horse and go on, and it's like that itself is the most American story.
Well, there's tons of failure. I mean, the Western, I mean, in Lonesome Dove, but in a lot of the you know, the thing falls apart. It doesn't work. You don't make it in time. You don't, you know, that your train robbery goes wrong. And there's also, I think you're absolutely right, that built into the genre is an awareness of its own mythic stature. I mean, it's the most famous line in any Western is "print the legend," right? Which is to say, the whole story that you've been watching is a lie, right? Or the whole story that you've been getting is a lie. You know, Henry Fonda was not the hero of that story, but that's the story we're gonna tell. You know, Jimmy Stewart didn't single-handedly rescue the town and the man who shot Liberty Valance from the terrible outlaw. It was John Wayne, and it was the bad guy who turned out who was, you know, really the hero. And so there's always, I mean, just to kind of come full circle to when we were talking about Sinners, about the sort of the doubleness, the twinning, that you can't have, you know, it's not just sort of the white hat and the black hat. They go together. You can't tell them apart. I mean, there's so much American culture is, especially I think in movies and TV, is fascinated by that kind of, you know, that sort of moral ambiguity and the fact that, well, you know, who you think are the good guys and who are the bad guys you may have it completely backwards, or you may not be able to make the determination at all.
I actually think this is a good stopping point to maybe turn it over to y'all. We've got, I think, 15 minutes for questions. If anyone's got one, I think, will a mic arrive? I
think
feel
a mic will
Yes,
arrive.
indeed. Right here.
Should
Let's
we
start in the front.
We'll point.
What do you think about objects? I'm thinking about the Tesla cyber pickup truck.
That's like evil America. That's Marvel America.
But it's now.
Meta Glasses America.
true.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it's a total morph of the male image from being one type of masculinity of the Ford F-150 to the techno bro who's scooting around with his Tesla pickup truck. And I think it's a real transition, and it is a step from the Wild West and a part of our culture that's really changed.
Yeah, whenever I see those in Brooklyn, I'm like, get out. This is the commie corridor. Like, get out of here. Like you said, it does feel like a shift, but it's also maybe just an exact continuation of this kind of false conquering. I grew up in Houston where there were F-150s with lifts and cowboy hats in the front, and I was like, y'all live, and it's in a 6 million person, it's the third biggest city in the United States. Like, what are we doing? Like you have never done farm work in your life. What are we doing here? And it's the same with it's even more embarrassing with the Silicon Valley version, where they fancy themselves kind of conquerors and great agents of change and like power, and that they're like riding the horse of American promise. But it's like coding, it's coding, it's anti-physical. At least with Westerns, they had to hunt something, and at least it was honest murder. This is like this is dishonest murder. This is a dishonest keyboard-based kind of oppression that they are perpetuating. And so it's new aesthetically. It's so embarrassing aesthetically. At least the old violence, it's nice to look at. This is
Yes.
yeah. Well, she's saying these aren't. This is a co-opting. It's a appropriation. You're of course right in that like they are not physically doing anything, and However, I do think I think there's an argument to be made that they are the same in that they are the current version of the most rapacious, the most acquisitional, the most heartless, the most I will rocket myself to riches at the expense of the land. There's a way that like tech is directly despoiling the land right now with whatever data centers, all of that stuff. Like I think they are the inheritance of those men, but it's just embarrassing because it's like as I've written, there's no actual land, there's no frontier, there's no wild cattle. What they're colonizing instead is like our attentions, our bodies, our hearts, our last bits of spare water, and it's so but I kind of think they're right. It's just embarrassing.
And well, partly because it's just an aesthetic failure. I mean, there is industrial design that turns out to be kind of beautiful. Whether it's sort of older cars or Coca-Cola can. I mean, there is a sort of machine or industrial aesthetic that you can look at with some sense of kind of design ingenuity or integrity, and these things are just so just ugly and awful. They just don't look like anything. I would say, I mean, when you asked about objects, it's interesting. The first thing that popped into my mind was not a new object, but was like the KitchenAid stand mixer. Because my father grew up in a small town in southwestern Ohio, not far from where J.D. Vance grew up, actually, but which was sort of the factory town for KitchenAid, for Hobart Brothers, and just all of the appliances in his family's house and sort of were KitchenAid, which was then sort of bought out, and they're not made there anymore. But that for me is just such a beautiful object with such a like powerful motor, and it will stiffen your egg whites in 10 seconds, and that's you see French housewives beating them with a whisk in a copper bowl for
no,
20
we're
minutes.
turning on a KitchenAid.
There it is, meringue.
I know, I do. It is sort of like, this is where like, I kind of think the most American object is a gun, unfortunately. I think it's like the whole world would agree to that. I think it's, if you were to, and I think that's, there's something unbelievably heartbreaking about the fact that like, I think that instinctively that just feels, it's the car, the Coca-Cola, the gun, but I wish it was the stand mixer. With no ambitions to conquer anything, but just whip your egg whites faster.
Back there, maybe? Or
Hello? Hello. Thank you so much for your work. I wanted to ask about works of art, kind of also paralleling it to the Declaration of Independence, and with some of the talks we've heard this week, that it is an organic thing that invites increasing inclusivity over time in terms of, yes, a work, because we hear a lot this week, you can't spew facts to people, you need a good story. And then, but also part of what I'm hearing you saying is a good story also needs to be revisited, you know, generation after generation to keep increasing inclusivity, perhaps. Like, would you say that, yes, we want a good story, you know, to kind of Trojan horse, like, inclusivity, but also works of art need to be revisited generation after generation to increase the inclusivity over time?
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, because the Declaration is a great example of that, of this text that was written in a great hurry by a committee of people. That I mean, I wrote something about it for this whole semi-quennial thing. When I thought, you know, we tend to say that they meant more than they said, but actually, in a way, they said more than they meant. That is to say that the sort of the inclusivity, the idea that these words might apply to the people that they weren't thinking about when they wrote this document, is part of that interpretive work, that revisiting. And I think that there are a lot of American works that do that and have that, and that their longevity comes from. I mean, I think about The Great Gatsby, you know, which just turned 100 last year, which is a book, again, a book like, he was 26 years old when he wrote it. He didn't necessarily know what he was doing. It wasn't very well received at the time. And yet, this is a book that just, every generation and from every angle, there's just sort of more to it and more that can be put in it and more that can be done with that character in a way that people, especially I think young readers who are its main first readers, you know, in high school or college classes, make it theirs in a way. You know, take it and don't necessarily revere it or kind of worship it, which is, I think, the worst thing that can ever happen in a way to a work of art. But like, take it and take it apart and mess around with it.
I think too. I think both are really important. Like, I find both personally very important. I think that we need both. For example, like the way the Odyssey was cast, which is like so anodyne, you know, like it's like I loved it, by the way, but it's so anodyne that it's crazy to me that anyone could get upset of. It's not like a particularly brave act of race blind casting, but it works because the casting is just good, actor by actor. And then I also think, you know, like as a non-white woman, it has always felt really important to me. Like I'm reading Moby Dick for the first time right now with a bunch of my girlfriends, and we're all like, this book is incredible. The first part in the motel is super gay. It's so fun. It's so silly. Like, this is like, it's important that anyone can lay claim to anything within the canon and feel like it belongs to them as is, as written. And I, due to like certain personality defects I possess, have never had an issue doing that. And I think that's really important. Like, I think it's really important that a work of art can be whatever it is and that anyone can allow themselves to have a real claim on it. And then I think it's also important that they could be taken apart and reinterpreted and reopened in a more formal way. But I do think we need both. And I do think and I'm heartened, by the way, you know, I also just read Stoner for the first time, which was, everyone was reading that in 2014. And it was like, this is another kind of really limited, really, like when the work of art in and of itself is just so unassailable that everyone wants it and everyone claims it, and it becomes important to any kind of person and for any kind of reason. Like, I think it kind of renders this whole conversation like it's proof of it. You know, art opens itself up to anyone, no matter who was written by, what conditions it was produced under, if the art itself is good.
Hey, I think a lot about protopianism, and I wondered if there's a piece of culture, either that you mentioned or a different one, that makes you think like, ooh, I want to live in that American future.
I don't know.
I remember one. I have like a cognitive defect that makes it impossible for me to think more than 3 months into the future at any given time. And maybe it's like a way of blinding myself to election cycles or something. But I almost never, we are like, I have to reach back to like the sort of Nathaniel Hawthorne era, sort of, that kind of transcendental to be like, this is a future America, a then future America that is appealing to me. Like I remember having this thought watching Arrival, which I remember watching the day after the 2016 election. And I was just crying in the theater for, obviously unrelated reasons, but also because I love the short story that Arrival is based on. I actually think of Ted Chiang's work as kind of, it's some of the only near future grounded sci-fi that addresses, kind of in a George Saunders-y way, that has the sort of intellectual capacity to take on the near future of the kind of present dystopia and inject some sort of hope into it in a way that doesn't feel false to me. And I remember like weeping watching Arrival, thinking like, wow, this version of this country where these foreign entities descend and we wouldn't immediately like, shoot them out of the sky. Like how beautiful this is.
Yeah, I mean that same idea kind of influences Disclosure Day.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same.
Did you like it?
Well,
We'll talk about that later.
That'll be right. We'll have a separate session just on. Yes, but yes,
Yeah.
or yes and, or whatever the improv cue is. But I don't know. Yeah, visions of the future are hard for me because I can't. I'm sort of too literal minded, too present minded, maybe too historically minded. But I do love, I did love the first, whatever it is, 40 minutes of WALL-E. Just the idea of being completely alone with all of the trash that's been left behind, including the old movies. That was sort of like that would be all right. Just doing your little robot job every day.
Hey, thanks for a scintillating and stimulating discussion. Let's bring it back to the present. When you were setting up the juke joint barn where Sinners is set, I found myself looking around this tent and asking myself the question, where are the zombies? Who are the zombies?
Vampires.
Here?
They were vampires.
The vampires. Yeah, where are the vampires? Who are the vampires? I think in our culture, we're always looking for them, and they're always somebody who's not us. They're communists or they're maggots. So what do we do in the present to identify an evil twin and not demonize it? And where do we look? Inside, around? Help us out in the present.
I mean, I would quote, it is from the past, but I would quote the great Walt Kelly in the voice of Pogo, who said famously, we have met the enemy and he is us. I mean, that's who the vampires are. Let's not kid ourselves.
I was going to say the same thing. I think that's the good twin, bad twin. Like, if one wants to draw out that frame, it's that they've got the same DNA. They've got the same life. They've lived the same life fundamentally. And I think that's the key to, as someone that grew up exclusively around like hardcore evangelical conservatives and whose politics are far more commie corridor than that, I think that is the key, that we within us all hold the capacity to act as vampires. And we probably have inadvertently, and we probably do inadvertently. And so I think that actually it seems to me like on a practical level, the way that I think about this question is, it's like it probably feels much more useful to be ferreting out the vampire within myself at any given time and nudging her out the door, trying to keep her at bay without maybe demonizing her, whatever, right? It's identifying that and dealing with her is kind of the work of a lifetime in and of itself. And then just doing that changes the way that you interact with everyone else who has their own potential, juke joint entrepreneur and vampire. I think learning to do that with yourself is the way that we learn to do that with the world at large.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. I would say also, if you wanted, to sort of my own kind of favorite, speaking of comic corridor, my own favorite sort of Marxist interpretation of sinners is that the vampire is the system. The vampire is capitalism, and that is, I think, what the movie in a way is saying. That there is this sort of system that commercializes and commodifies, all human endeavor, all human labor, all human creativity, and makes it commodities for sale. But we live in that. Right, we can't. Opting out of it is a very hard and for many of us unrealistic choice. And it's also true, as the movie kind of acknowledges, that it creates a lot of what we like. It creates these great movies and records and is the sort of the vessel for all of this kind of beauty and creativity that allows us to imagine something else. And that is really the kind of the contradiction. So we are the vampires, and we live in the vampire world, but there's a piece of us, as you're saying, that isn't that, and the more we can hold on to and sort of nurture that piece, even within, this sort of poisonous landscape, the more hope there might be, or at least, if not hope, at least relief.
I think that's a great note to end on. Yeah? Thank you,
Sure.
guys.
Thank you, Gia. Thank you, Tony. Fascinating conversation. Wonderful. Thank you both so much. All right, everyone. So we're going to take just a short break here. We're going to be back in our seats at 11 when we'll have Ennis Freedom Cantor join us on stage with Nick Thompson. So we're going to get into a wonderful conversation at 11. Please come back. Couple of other things for the day here. Bookshop's still open, and after next session at 12:15, we're going to make the authors available for some book signing. So if you want to stick around, really, everyone speaking this morning has a book over there at the pop-up shop. So come on back. I'm going to give a 5-minute warning and then a 2-minute warning. So I'll be back up here wrangling you all. Thank you.